Hey there, I'm Novan, and today I wanted to give you 6 tips to try out whenever you're coding something new. So let's go. I think this is a fun topic because undoubtedly we all face it. How do you get started on a new project or new feature, new task that you pulled from a backlog? Let's start with number 1. Maybe you're the dive right in kind of person, or maybe you're the type of person who likes to sit back and think and plan. Whatever type of person you are, recognize those first few moments that you have with a problem for what those moments are. They're moments to familiarize yourself with the problem space. And that perhaps is one of the most important things that you can do before you set out to actually solve the problem. If you're stepping away from the keyboard and you're going off to really think about it, you're doing this naturally. But if you're the type of person like me that dives right in and just wants to write code, recognize that in that time, you're just building that familiarity with what you're doing. You're not actually trying to set out to solve the problem, you're just still trying to understand the problem. And so don't look to that code as ultimately what is going to solve the problem. Just recognize that, again, you're building that familiarity. And depending on the type of problem that you're working on, you always want to make sure you're giving it the time that it deserves. As much as I like to fail fast and get right in there, I always want to make sure that, especially when there's creativity involved, that I'm letting things simmer a little bit before I really get to trying to solve the final problem. So here's a fun fact. Did you know that 7 different people apparently invented the wheel all at the same time and didn't know it? So, no, okay, that's a total lie. But the point is, don't reinvent things. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Your project might be unique, but you can often iterate off of an existing approach. Seeing what someone else has produced will give you a sense of what they tried, what they were able to do. It'll make you challenge your own assumptions, and you can build off of their success. So do research, see what else is out there before diving in. Think through the entire problem and think linearly. Focus on the full problem from soup to nuts, beginning to end. Especially if that workflow that you're working on has 10 plus steps, it's easy to make an assumption early on that will lock you in and will make it harder for you to change later on. And you don't want to be refactoring that early. Oftentimes it helps to think of the problem in reverse. Start at the end and work your way backwards. Don't limit your focus to just one area of the problem, but think of the entire thing and know where you want to end up so that when you actually set out to solve the problem, you don't lock yourself in and you don't put yourself down the wrong path. So especially when you're working with a team, it's really easy to all of a sudden see the realm of possibilities and all the things that you can do. But because you can do them, should you do them? Having a clear sense of what your objective is really important. If you're working off of a user story, that objective will probably be pretty clear. You're probably seeing something like, as a banking customer, I want to see all my account balances on one page. That's a proper user story. But if you're thinking of it in terms of a larger scope kind of project where you're building something from scratch and your idea is really broad in scope, you want to figure out what that MVP is. You want to prioritize all the work that reaches your objective over anything that just might be fluff or bloat or things that are not a core part of that product. So again, prioritize the objectives over the output. Let's say you're stuck on a problem and you need to ask for help. That's okay because we've all been there and we always need to be able to ask for help when we need it. But when you make that ask, you want it to be very specific and focused to the very problem that you're working on and not be asking any kind of broad, ambiguous question. You want to help the person who's going to help you out. Too often what I'll see is someone asking for help and they start to paint this very vivid scenario. They give all of these details, it's information overload, and the person who's going to be helping them gets lost. They don't know what information they need to be tracking, what's relevant, what's irrelevant, because they don't even know what the question is. When you state the ask at the beginning, it makes it a lot easier because it helps that person know exactly what information they need to hear, and they can then help guide and give you kind of the response that you need. So one pattern I like to follow is always start with my ask, then state my situation, and then follow up with any background details if I think they're necessary. So for example, let's say I'm trying to run this report in production and I can't connect to it. So if I'm emailing someone, I'll state very explicitly, ask, do I connect to prod the same way that I do in the lower environment? Here's the situation. I'm getting a connection error whenever I try to connect to the prod environment. And then I'll state my background. There's this report and it's producing these weird results in the lower environment, and I want to run the same query in production so that I can see what production produces. So that helps someone right off the bat because they know exactly what they're being asked, they know that they need to help me, and they know where I'm getting stuck. And compare that to if I were to do it in reverse, where I say, hey, so there's this report in the lower environment and it's producing these weird results, and I want to compare it to what is running in production. And whenever I try to connect to production, I'm getting this weird connection error, and I don't know if I'm doing it right. So can you tell me, do I connect to the production database the same way that I do in dev? It took me a lot longer to get to the question, and someone who knows immediately where I'm getting stuck can just look at the ask and they don't even need to read on. So it helps the person helping you to get there fast. I think this one's an interesting one because it gives a different framework for how to work and how to write code. Basically what you want to do is try to produce something discrete every 2 hours. And if you need more time, go to 4 hours, but try not to go beyond that. Think in the 2 to 4 hour range. At the end of each of those blocks, you want to always have something that stands on its own, that is testable, but not necessarily something that is shippable. You just want a chunk of code that you probably don't need to go back and change, that it achieves that goal of what that code is set out to do. You know, I'm a big believer in Kanban and I love the methodology. And with Kanban, the idea behind it is really that work takes as long as it needs to get it done and do it right. But conversely, there's this idea called Parkinson's law, which states that work will always take as long as the time that you give it. So if something could conceivably get done in 1 week, but you give it 3 weeks, it's going to expand to take the full 3 weeks. So the question is, how do you find that right balance? And I think, you know, if you take a test-driven approach to your development, which you definitely should, the nice part is that because you're always writing a failing test before you write your code, when you do write your code, then you have something that works and it's discrete. And so you're building out those units and that chunkable area. You're producing discrete work. And so we all know that it's really tough to just all of a sudden pause and then later come back to a project. It's hard to kind of do that context switching. And the more stopping points you have and the more that you give yourself, it'll help you get that sense of progress. It'll help you feel like you're accomplishing something and you're moving the ball forward. And your tests will also even give you something that you can easily trace back where you left off. So I've found that I'm pretty good at estimating things that take about 2 hours. 4 hours is probably the most. Going beyond that, I think you just lose a ton of accuracy. And so for that reason, when you are breaking things down, think of them as what can I accomplish in 2 hours or 3 hours or 4 hours, but don't go beyond that. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm really interested to hear what you have to say about it. So shoot me a message, tell me what you thought. And otherwise, I'm running this podcast called Increments, and it's a place where we can create the space and focus more intentionally on how we want to grow our careers as developers. So check it out at increments.dev. It's also on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. And I hope we'll talk soon. Thanks a lot.